He'd kept a journal for years, tucked away where I never looked. But that night, a single page caught my eye, "If I'm gone," and I realized it was written for me, not anyone else. I had always known my husband to be quiet, gentle, and careful with his words. Over the years, he had kept a small leather-bound journal, filling it with thoughts, reminders, and musings that he never spoke aloud. I never touched it. It felt sacred, private, as if opening it would reveal a part of him I wasn't meant to see, until now. That evening, after tidying the kitchen and settling into the quiet of our home, I noticed the journal lying slightly open on the nightstand. A single page peeked out, and my eyes were drawn to it immediately. Bold, familiar handwriting at the top read, "If I'm gone." My heart skipped. I sank onto the edge of the bed, fingers trembling slightly as I reached for it. The leather cover smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish, and it felt heavier in my hands than I expected, as if it carried the weight of all the years he had poured into it. Turning the page, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. What had he hidden in these lines? What thoughts, what regrets, what love had he kept locked away for so long? The room seemed to hush around me, as though it too were holding its breath, waiting for me to discover the words he had never spoken. As I read the first sentences, I was drawn into his private world. His words were raw, intimate, and tender. Each line revealed parts of him I had never seen, emotions he carried silently, and confessions he never shared. There was love, yes, but also longing, guilt, and a quiet desire to be understood. In that moment, with the journal resting on my lap, I realized this was more than a book of thoughts. It was a bridge, a window into his heart. And I knew that reading it would change everything I thought I knew about him, and about us. I carefully turned the pages, my fingers brushing against years of his private thoughts. The first entries weren't about me, they were about him, long before we met. He wrote of quiet nights filled with worry, mornings when he felt unsure of himself, and small dreams that seemed too fragile to share. It was startling to see this side of him, the part that carried fears silently, the part that bore the weight of responsibility and expectation. He wrote of moments when he felt he might fail, when he questioned whether he was enough for the life he wanted to build. And yet, even then, love threaded through every line, subtle but unmistakable. Some passages made me catch my breath. He had noticed details in his life that I'd never imagined mattered to him, the way a sunset reminded him of hope, the soft sound of rain on the roof, or the comfort of a warm cup of tea on a cold morning. Each note revealed someone thoughtful, deeply feeling, and quietly brave. I could almost hear his voice whispering across time, carrying both vulnerability and honesty. He hadn't written these things for recognition or praise, he had written them to remember, to survive, and now, somehow, to reach me. Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the journal was more than a record of events. It was a map of his heart, a window into his soul. With every line, I felt closer to him, understanding parts of his life, and his love, that he had never shared aloud. In that quiet bedroom, surrounded by the familiar scent of our home, I sat holding his words and felt a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Sorrow for the moments I hadn't known, and gratitude for the man he had been, the love he had carried, and the courage it had taken to pour it all onto paper. As I continued reading, his words became more intimate, more vulnerable. He wrote about regrets he had carried quietly, small and large mistakes that weighed on his heart, and moments he wished he could relive and do differently. He apologized, without ever addressing me directly, for nights he came home tired and irritable, for arguments that had seemed to erupt from nowhere, and for times he had withdrawn when I needed him most. Each sentence was a gentle confession, written not for judgment, but as a quiet plea for understanding. Amid the regrets, there were flashes of tenderness. He noted the little things he had cherished but never said aloud, the sound of my laugh in the mornings, the way I smoothed my hair absent-mindedly, the gentle care I put into everyday tasks. He admitted that these small moments had brought him joy, more than he had words to express at the time. Reading his honesty, I felt tears welling up. It was as if I were sitting beside him, hearing his voice tremble with love and vulnerability. I realized that he had always carried a deep desire to do right by me, even when life made it difficult. For the first time, I understood that love isn't measured by perfection or flawless days, it's measured by effort, thought, and the quiet courage to care deeply, even in the shadows of regret. I held the journal close, letting the words sink in. I felt closer to him than ever before, connected through the vulnerability he had shared in these pages. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I understood something profound. Love often speaks loudest in the things left unsaid, and sometimes, a journal can say what words never could. As I flipped further into the journal, I came across entries about times we had argued. He described the mornings when tensions flared over trivial things, evenings when silence stretched too long between us, and moments when pride had gotten the better of him. Reading his words, I realized he had replayed each incident countless times in his mind, wondering if he had handled it differently, if he had hurt me unintentionally. There was a quiet sorrow in his writing, a weight of guilt carried silently, perhaps to spare me or himself from pain. I remembered those moments differently, mostly as fleeting frustrations, but through his eyes, I could see the emotional toll they had taken. He had suffered quietly, burdened by guilt and regret, while continuing to love me deeply, even when it was hard to show. Some passages made my heart ache. He admitted feelings of helplessness, times when he wanted to fix things but didn't know how. Yet, even in his regrets, there was love, persistent, patient, and quietly enduring. It was clear he had always tried to protect our bond, even if he sometimes faltered. Tears slid down my cheeks as I sat there in the soft lamplight, journal in hand. I felt gratitude for his honesty and humility, and sorrow for the silent struggles he had endured alone. The journal wasn't just a record of events, it was a mirror to his heart, showing the depth of his love, his guilt, and his unwavering desire to be better. In that quiet moment, I realized that love isn't always perfect, but it is enduring, and understanding someone fully often requires seeing both their light and their shadows. As I turned the pages, the tone of his writing shifted slightly. The regret and guilt softened, replaced by quiet moments of appreciation and love. He had written about the small, everyday things that had brought him joy, things he never mentioned aloud. He wrote about mornings when he watched me sip my coffee in silence, the way sunlight caught my hair, and how my laugh filled the corners of our home with warmth. He had noticed the tiny gestures I made, folding laundry with care, tending the garden, leaving little notes for him when I knew he'd have a long day. These were the moments he treasured silently, tucked away in his heart like precious gems. Reading this, I felt a smile grow softly on my face. I could hear him in each word, his voice gentle, full of love, and a little wistful. He had lived quietly with these small joys, never feeling the need to announce them, yet they had shaped his happiness and anchored his love for me. He even recalled times we laughed together, the inside jokes that only we understood, and the quiet evenings when we simply sat together in contented silence. He wrote that those fleeting moments, though ordinary, had been the most meaningful parts of his life. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized how deeply he had loved me in ways I had overlooked. His words were not grand declarations but gentle reminders that love often lives in the small, consistent acts, the unnoticed smiles, the quiet attention, the tender care we give to one another every day. Holding the journal in my lap, I felt a warmth in my chest. I was beginning to see him fully, not just as my husband, but as the thoughtful, loving, and deeply feeling man who had quietly built a life around us, one small joy at a time. As I turned the pages further, I stumbled across words that made my breath catch. He had written about something he had never told me, a secret he had carried alone for years. My heart thumped as I read carefully, afraid that a single misstep might shatter the fragile thread of understanding we had begun to weave through this journal. He described a difficult choice he had made early in our marriage, one he thought would protect me, but which had burdened him with guilt. He admitted that he had hidden a piece of his past, believing it was for my own good, yet he had worried endlessly about how I would feel if I ever discovered it. The weight of his honesty hit me hard. I realized that this secret had shaped some of the distance I had sometimes felt between us, the unexplained hesitations, and the quiet moments when he seemed distant. But reading it now, I understood the courage it took to carry it silently, and the love that had motivated him to protect me even at a cost to himself. Tears blurred my vision as I read each line, the emotion in his writing palpable. He wrote not only of the burden but also of hope, that I might one day see his intentions, understand his love, and forgive him for the mistakes he had made in trying to shield us both. In that quiet room, I felt a mix of sorrow, empathy, and deep appreciation. He had been vulnerable in a way I never imagined, sharing a truth that could have been divisive, but instead showed the depth of his love and care. Holding the journal close, I whispered softly to myself, "I see you, and I understand you now." And for the first time, I felt the bridge between us growing stronger, built not just of words, but of trust, honesty, and shared hearts. I set the journal gently on my lap and leaned back, letting the words sink in. The room was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the clock and the soft rustle of pages as I had turned them. I thought about all the years we had shared, both the joyful and the challenging, and I realized how little I had truly known the inner world he carried silently. I reflected on my own part in our misunderstandings. How often had I assumed he didn't care, when in truth, he had been carrying unspoken love and worry? How often had I held on to frustration, when perhaps he had been struggling quietly with his own fears and doubts? Tears filled my eyes as I recognized the weight he had borne alone, and a warmth spread through me, the beginning of forgiveness. It wasn't a sudden, sweeping absolution, but a quiet, steady realization that we had both been human, both imperfect, and both striving in our own ways. He had written as if speaking directly to me, sharing not just regrets, but hope. Hope that I could understand, that I could see the love behind his actions, and that even the unspoken mistakes could be forgiven. I felt a soft peace begin to settle in my heart, a bridge forming over the distance that had sometimes felt insurmountable. In that moment, I realized that love is not just about perfect days or flawless actions, it is about persistence, understanding, and the courage to reveal one's heart, even when it feels risky. And as I looked down at the pages, I whispered softly, "I understand. I forgive you." It was the first time I truly felt the depth of his love, and in that quiet reflection, I sensed a shift, a beginning of healing that would carry us both forward. As I turned another page, I noticed a shift in his tone. The words felt more intimate, almost like a letter written directly to me, imagining a day when he might no longer be here. His handwriting seemed to tremble slightly, as if he had poured every ounce of love and worry into this message. "If I'm gone," he had written, "know that I loved you more than I could ever express. Every choice I made, every quiet act, every day I spent with you, was filled with love. I carried my fears and mistakes silently because I never wanted to burden you, but please understand, my heart has always been yours." I could feel his presence in the room as I read, as though he were speaking to me across time. He wrote about his hopes for me, his gratitude for our life together, and the small joys that had made every day meaningful. He acknowledged the struggles, the moments of tension, the regrets, but always with a focus on love, forgiveness, and understanding. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I whispered back to him, my voice trembling, "I see you. I love you too." Every word he had left behind felt like a warm embrace, a reassurance that love endures even beyond absence, even beyond words unspoken. In that quiet bedroom, the weight of grief and the comfort of his words mingled. I realized that these pages were more than a journal, they were a testament to a lifetime of devotion, a bridge between hearts, and a guide for forgiveness and closure. By the time I laid the journal down, my chest was heavy with emotion, yet lightened by understanding. For the first time, I truly felt the depth of his love, and the profound gift he had left behind in these final words. After reading his final words, I sat in silence for a long time, the journal resting on my lap. The house was still, but my mind was alive with his presence, as if the room itself had absorbed his feelings and whispered them back to me. I thought about all the times I had misunderstood him, all the moments when I had assumed he didn't care, or that he had been distant. Now, seeing the world through his words, I could understand the weight he had carried silently, the fears, the doubts, the guilt, and the endless love that had motivated every action. There was a bittersweet clarity in this realization. I felt sorrow for the moments we had stumbled, for the times our hearts had seemed apart, but also gratitude that we had always tried, even imperfectly, to love each other. His struggles were not failures, they were reflections of a deeply human heart, striving to protect and care, even when it didn't always succeed. I gently closed the journal, holding it to my chest. A quiet peace settled over me, and for the first time, I felt fully connected to him, to his intentions, and to the love that had endured through every trial. I whispered softly, "I understand you now. I forgive you." In that moment, I realized something profound. Closure isn't about forgetting mistakes or pain. It's about understanding, empathy, and allowing love to guide you through the complexities of life. His words had given me that gift, and I knew I would carry it with me always. Sitting there in the soft lamplight, I felt the bridge between us grow stronger, built of honesty, courage, and the enduring love that he had left behind in every carefully written line. I sat quietly, the journal open before me, and let the words settle into my heart. Each page had carried him to me, layer by layer, revealing the man I loved, the struggles he had faced, and the depth of his care. I realized that this journal was more than a record of thoughts, it was a legacy, a gift, a bridge between our hearts. I thought about what to do with it. Could I keep it hidden, a private treasure between us? Or should I share it, so that others might understand him as I now did? The decision felt weighty, but one thing was certain, it had changed me. It had shifted my perspective, softened my judgments, and strengthened my love. As I traced my fingers over the familiar handwriting, I remembered moments from our life together, the laughter, the small arguments, the quiet evenings spent side by side. All of it had been touched by his hidden care, his love expressed in ways I had only now begun to see. A calm warmth spread through me. I understood that life is not about perfection, it's about connection, honesty, and the courage to reveal our hearts. The journal had given me that understanding, a clear path to forgiveness, and a deeper appreciation for the love we shared. Closing the journal gently, I whispered to myself, I will carry this with me, and I will honor him by remembering everything he tried to share, even when words failed him. In that moment, I felt a quiet resolve, a sense of peace and closure. The journal had spoken, and I had listened. It had guided me to a place of understanding, love, and acceptance that I would carry forward for the rest of my life. I closed the journal softly and placed it back on the nightstand, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over me. Each page had carried him to me, not just the man I had lived with, but the heart behind the words, the quiet struggles, and the deep love he had held for so many years. Sitting there in the gentle glow of the lamp, I whispered a soft thank you, not just to him, but to life itself, for giving me the chance to understand, to forgive, and to love more deeply. The journal had shown me that love is not measured by perfection, but by presence, honesty, and the courage to reveal your heart, even when it's difficult. And now, as I reflect on our journey together, I feel the weight of years lifted and replaced with clarity. I know that life is fragile, that words unspoken can linger, and that sometimes, the quietest gestures carry the loudest love. If this story has touched your heart even a little, I hope it reminds you to treasure the people you love, to speak your feelings, and to forgive both yourself and others for the moments that were less than perfect. Thank you for listening, dear friends. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. And remember, every heart has stories waiting to be understood. Sometimes, all it takes is listening closely.